The rain was already pounding against the marble steps of the Manhattan Supreme Court when Harper Ellington stumbled outside, the divorce papers trembling in her hand. The city lights blurred through her tears, turning Park Row into a smear of neon and heartbreak. She was 7 months pregnant, shivering under the sharp wind, slicing through her thin coat, but the cold wasn't what made her shake. It was the sound of her ex-husband's voice still echoing in her head, calm, polished, merciless. "Just sign it, Harper. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He had slid the Mont Blanc pen across the table, as if he were closing a business deal, not ending a marriage. And she, exhausted, frightened, drowning in the belief that she ruined everything she touched, signed. She watched him walk away without a backward glance, his leather shoes tapping the courthouse floor like a metronome, marking the death of their life together. Now, outside, the rain came harder, soaking her through as she clutched her stomach. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the child she still believed she could protect. But the lightning flashing above her felt like a warning, and the sharp pain that suddenly tore through her abdomen confirmed it. She gasped, knees buckling as another contraction crashed over her. Not now. Not like this. A taxi honked as she stumbled onto the curb. One hand gripping the courthouse railing, the other wrapped around her belly. Her vision doubled, then tripled. She tried to wave for help, but the city moved around her like she was invisible. By the time the paramedics reached her, she was nearly unconscious, rain washing the tears from her cheeks. Voices blurred, male, female, urgent. "She's early, get her inside. Pulse is dropping, she's losing a lot of blood. I have fresh. Call ahead to Manhattan General." The stretcher tilted. Lights streaked across her fading vision. She tried to speak, to ask if her baby was okay, but her lips wouldn't move. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was the outline of a glass tower, her ex-husband's office building glowing over the city like a monument to everything he kept while she lost everything. When Harper woke hours later, drugged and disoriented, a nurse stood at her bedside with a blank expression and a clipboard pressed to her chest. My baby," Harper whispered. The nurse swallowed. "I'm sorry, the baby didn't make it." Harper felt her soul collapse inward, a quiet implosion no one else seemed to notice. She begged to see him, to hold him, to say goodbye. But the nurse gently insisted the hospital had already handled the arrangements. No photo, no footprints, no burial location, no explanation. Just silence. Harper cried until her throat burned, until she had nothing left inside her but a hollow ache she carried for 7 long years. And then, 7 years later, an audio file arrived in her inbox. A small, trembling voice whispered, "Mom, why did you abandon me?" And Harper Ellington forgot how to breathe. Harper Ellington remembered only fragments of that night, bright white lights, metallic voices, and the crushing fear that she was losing the only thing left that still loved her. But the memory that haunted her most was the moment she woke up in a dim hospital room, IV burning her arm, and realized the world had already moved on without her. The door opened softly. A doctor she didn't recognize stepped inside, flipping through a chart without ever meeting her eyes. "Miss Ellington," he said, voice flat, rehearsed. "I'm very sorry for your loss." She blinked, disoriented. "My loss?" He cleared his throat, still avoiding her. "Your baby didn't survive. Complications from premature labor." The words struck her like a blunt force to the chest. She gripped the thin blanket, eyes stinging. "I want to see him. Please just let me hold my son." The doctor hesitated only a second, but it was enough for Harper to sense something was terribly wrong. "The remains have already been released for private handling," he said. "Arrangements were made by your husband." "My ex-husband," she whispered, almost choking on the correction. The doctor simply nodded and walked out, leaving her alone with a grief so heavy she thought it might crush her lungs. Moments later, Brandon Hale's mother swept into the room like a cold gust of wind. Perfect hair, perfect pearls, perfect disdain. She placed a small white envelope on Harper's bedside table. "This is the burial location," she said. "A simple plot. It's better this way." Harper reached for the envelope with trembling fingers, but the older woman pulled it back just out of reach. "You don't need to go," she added quickly. "Seeing something like that, it will only make your condition worse." "My condition?" Harper whispered. "You've been unstable for months, dear. Brandon only wanted to protect the baby." Her tone sharpened. We all did. Harper's breath caught. I wasn't unstable. The woman offered a patronizing smile. Of course you were. No shame in it. Some women simply weren't meant for motherhood. Those words, those exact words, latched onto her heart like hooks. When Harper tried to speak again, to protest, a nurse appeared with a small syringe. Just something to help you rest, the nurse murmured. Harper felt the cold spread through her veins and darkness swallow her whole. When she woke again, the envelope was gone. So was the doctor's chart. So was any mention of her child. Weeks later, when she was strong enough to return to the hospital, she tried to find records, birth certificate, death certificate, admission logs, but every file she requested was misplaced, incomplete, or restricted. No answers, no photos, no grave, no proof. Her baby had been erased. For years she tried to accept it, to believe the official story, to suffocate the gnawing instinct that something was missing. But every night, as she fell asleep, clutching the ultrasound tucked beneath her pillow, a quiet whisper rose from the depths of her memory. Nothing about that night felt real. And 7 years later, she was about to learn why. 7 years slipped by, not like a river, but like a slow bleed. Harper Ellington didn't live those years, she survived them, the way a person clings to driftwood in the middle of a storm. Her once bright life dimmed into quiet routines and muted colors, the kind that nobody notices, not even the people who walk past her in the crowded hallways of Queen's Medical Center. Some nights, she worked double shifts in the ER just to avoid going home. Other nights, she sat alone on her old sofa, staring at the single ultrasound photo she kept tucked inside a cracked picture frame. The rest of her apartment was bare, no decorations, no plants, no warm light. Grief didn't leave room for anything living. She kept a Kindle on the nightstand, filled with self-help books she rarely finished. "You must rebuild," one author wrote. But Harper couldn't rebuild when the foundation of her life had been ripped out. She drank lukewarm tea, folded scrubs, and slept too little. If someone asked her what she wanted for her future, she wouldn't have known how to answer. She hadn't thought about the future in years. Her coworkers respected her work ethic but sensed something fragile beneath her calm surface. The way she pressed a hand to her chest whenever a newborn cried, the way her eyes softened when parents embraced their children. She never stayed too long in the maternity wing, she wasn't sure she'd survive it. Still, she functioned. Until the day she didn't. 3 months ago, during a chaotic night shift, a patient under her watch went into respiratory distress. The attending physician later noted a missing entry in the chart, an entry Harper was sure she had recorded. But the hospital accused her of negligence. Launching an internal investigation, she couldn't prove the record had been altered. And her supervisor, acting under quiet pressure from forces Harper couldn't see, put her on probation. It was the final blow to a woman already drowning. Then came the letter. A crisp white envelope slipped under her apartment door, no return address, no name. Inside was a printed complaint filed against her by an anonymous source, urging the hospital to terminate her immediately for the safety of patients. The timing was too perfect, too coordinated, too familiar. Harper sat on her couch, fingers shaking as she reread the document. Brandon Hale's tone echoed through it, cold, clinical, and strategically cruel. He had destroyed her once. He was finishing the job now. That night, she opened her laptop to search for legal help, but froze when she saw a reminder notification she had set years ago and forgotten. Liam's birthday, February 14. Her breath hitched. 7 years. 7 years since the hospital declared him dead. 7 years since the world convinced her she was unfit to be a mother. She whispered, "Happy birthday," into the quiet room, voice cracking like dry leaves. And then, just as she closed the laptop, her inbox pinged. A new message. No subject line. Just an audio file. Harper pressed play. A small voice, uncertain, trembling, breathed into the speaker. "Mom, why did you abandon me?" Her heart stopped. The audio file was only 6 seconds long, but it detonated inside Harper Ellington's world like a quiet bomb. She replayed it once, twice, a third time, pressing the phone to her trembling lips as if proximity could somehow make the voice make sense. "Mom, why did you abandon me?" The voice was small, uncertain, fragile, carrying the raw ache of a child who'd asked that question too many times without an answer. Harper felt each syllable carve into her ribs, her vision blurred, her fingers numb around the phone. For 7 years she had lived with her grief, accepting it as truth because the alternative was impossible. Babies declared dead didn't speak. Not unless the hospital had lied. Her pulse roared in her ears. She forced herself to breathe, but the air wouldn't enter her lungs. The tiny apartment seemed to tilt, the cracked paint on the walls bending as if reality itself were slipping. She checked the sender. Unknown address, no traceable metadata, no attached message, just the file. Her rational mind tried to steady her. Scam, mistake, wrong number, someone playing a cruel joke. But the moment she replayed the audio, those explanations fell apart. There was something heartbreakingly familiar in the tone, a softness she'd imagined for her son during the few months they shared breath. Her hands shook so violently she almost dropped the phone. She grabbed her coat and stumbled out of the apartment, the February air slapping her awake as she rushed down the dim hallway and onto the street. She couldn't stay inside, not with that voice echoing through every corner of her mind. Her feet carried her automatically to the one place she always went when she was falling apart, Queen's Medical Center. Even off-duty, even in the dead of night, it felt like the only ground that didn't collapse beneath her. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Harper pressed her back against the wall outside the supply room, phone clenched in her fist. She needed someone, anyone who could tell her she wasn't losing her mind. Footsteps approached. Dr. Adrian Cole, in his navy scrubs, stopped when he saw her, his brows pulled together in concern. Harper, did something happen? Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She handed him the phone with shaking fingers. Listen, she whispered. He tapped the file. The voice played again, soft, pleading, unforgettable. Adrian's expression didn't shift, but his eyes did. Just slightly. Just enough. That's a child, he said carefully. A boy, Harper breathed. My son was a boy. He hesitated. Where did this come from? I don't know, she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. But Adrian, the hospital told me he died. They told me he was gone. There was no body, no photo, no record, just their word. I tried to move on, but, her voice cracked. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me this is impossible. Adrian didn't. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Harper, sometimes hospitals make mistakes, and sometimes people hide them. Her heart slammed against her ribs. You think he's alive? Adrian didn't answer. But the look in his eyes was enough. And for the first time in 7 years, hope, terrifying, electric, impossible hope ignited in her chest. For the first time in years, Harper Ellington wasn't running on numbness. She was running on fear. And something worse, something she didn't dare name yet, hope. That dangerous spark could rebuild her or destroy her completely. Dr. Adrian Cole walked beside her through the dim hallway of Queen's Medical Center, guiding her into an empty consultation room. He flicked on the soft lamp in the corner, sparing her the harsh fluorescent glare. It was a small kindness, but she felt it like a lifeline. Sit, he said gently. Harper obeyed, hands twisting in her lap, the phone lying on the table between them like evidence in a crime. Adrian sat across from her, elbows on his knees, posture steady and calm, the opposite of the storm in her chest. Play it again, he said. She did. The child's voice filled the room. Mom, why did you abandon me? Adrian didn't look away from her. He didn't flinch. He listened to every millisecond, his eyes tightening with something heavy, recognition, maybe even dread. When the recording ended, Harper whispered, You're the only person who ever believed something was off that night. I remember you were on shift. You tried to talk to me, but they kept pushing you out of the room. Adrian exhaled slowly. Yeah, I remember. She blinked. You do? His jaw tightened. Harper, I don't forget cases like yours. He leaned back, hands clasped. 7 years ago, I was still a resident. I didn't have power, but I remember seeing you wheeled in. You were hemorrhaging. The chart said the father had given consent for sedation, except he hesitated. Except something felt staged, rushed. Her stomach twisted. Staged how? The attending and the administrator were already arguing before you even arrived. Your ex-husband was outside the door, making calls angry, insistent. And when the baby was declared dead, Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully. They moved too fast, way too fast. No standard protocol, no documentation shown to you, no opportunity for parental confirmation. Harper's breath stuttered. But why would they lie? Why would Brandon? Adrian's silence was answer enough. Her ex-husband was a man who cared only about reputation, status, and leverage. A child born to a mentally unstable wife during a messy separation? It would have ruined him. Adrian softened his tone. There was something else. Her eyes snapped up. A nurse on shift that night, Marcy. Sweet woman. Good instincts. She said the infant still had a pulse when she last checked. Weak but present. 209. Harper's whole body went cold. She told the attending, Adrian continued, but they dismissed her. Told her she misread. 2 days later, she was transferred to a different hospital with no explanation. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Harper's feet. So you think? I think, Adrian said gently, it's possible your son didn't die. She pressed a hand over her mouth, a sound escaping half sob, half disbelieving laugh. God, Adrian, why didn't you tell me? I tried, he whispered. But you were sedated for nearly 48 hours. By the time you were conscious, Brandon had already signed every exit document. Harper closed her eyes. The betrayal hit harder than the grief ever had. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a breath. Then who is that boy? And why is he calling me Mom? Adrian looked at her, eyes steady, resolute. That, he said, is what we're going to find out. Harper Ellington sat frozen in the small consultation room long after Dr. Adrian Cole left to pull whatever records he could from the hospital system. Her hands still trembled, her heartbeat a frantic, uneven rhythm in her ears. The recording had been enough to crack her world open, but Adrian's words had shattered it entirely. Your son might not have died. Those were the words she had dreamed of hearing for 7 years. Those were the words she feared most. Because if they were true, then someone had stolen him. When Adrian returned, he held a thin stack of papers. Too thin. Medical files usually came thick, heavy, filled with notes and timestamps. This looked like the scraps of a story someone had tried to erase. He placed them gently on the table. These were locked behind restricted access. I had to request temporary clearance from an attending physician who owes me a favor. But Harper. He hesitated. This file doesn't make sense. She inhaled sharply. What's missing? Adrian tapped the top page. Everything. He slid the first sheet toward her. It was a patient record, hers, but the timestamp was wrong. The admission time was several hours after she had been brought in. And under complications, the notes were vague, almost intentionally blurry. Unstable mental state, pre-delivery, distress, heavy sedation recommended. Harper felt a wave of nausea. I never consented to sedation. I know, Adrian said quietly. But this file makes it look like you demanded it. She shook her head. That's a lie. There's more. He handed her the next sheet. This is the newborn's file. Harper felt her blood run cold. The form listed a male infant, but there was no weight, no APGAR score, no notes from delivery. Just a stamped line at the bottom. Infant deceased cause. Fetal distress. No physician signature. No attending confirmation. No time of death. Just a rubber-stamped conclusion. Harper's breath cracked. This is impossible. Hospitals don't do this. There are protocols, procedures. There should be signatures, multiple signatures, a chart, a tag, something. Adrian nodded. Exactly, which is why this page. He slid her one last document. Should not exist. It was a consent form for post-mortem release of remains to designated party, signed not by Harper, but by Brandon Hale. Harper's hands shook violently. He signed for my baby's body, without telling me? Adrian lowered his voice. He signed as your legal proxy. But here's the problem. This form was filed under a temporary emergency guardianship clause that only applies if the mother is unconscious or declared incompetent. Her head snapped up. Incompetent? Adrian looked at her with deep regret. Harper, someone labeled you unstable in your chart. That's how Brandon gained legal authority over the newborn. Her entire world tilted. He took my baby, he took him, and made the hospital believe I couldn't be trusted. Or, Adrian said quietly, he made them write it that way. For a moment, Harper couldn't hear anything, not the beeping monitors outside the room, not the footsteps rushing past, not the hum of the building settling, just the voice. The tiny recording that had blown the truth wide open. Mom, why did you abandon me? Harper closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "I didn't abandon you," she whispered. "Someone took you from me." The first clue came in the form of a crumpled drawing. Harper Ellington sat in the corner of her small Brooklyn apartment, eyes locked on the rough sketches that had been slipped under her door in a plain manila envelope. Each line depicted a city she knew intimately, the jagged skyline of Manhattan, the glinting spires of glass towers, and a small figure on a bicycle weaving through traffic. The handwriting was childish, yet precise, almost meticulous. It was unmistakably a child's hand. Her breath caught. She picked up the first sketch and saw the small figure holding a balloon that floated over the city. The style was reminiscent of the stories she used to tell her unborn son about flying high above the buildings, free from harm. She traced the lines with trembling fingers, heart hammering, as if she could feel the child's presence through the paper. Then the phone rang. Harper's hands shook as she answered, expecting a wrong number. Instead, a calm female voice came through. "Is this Harper Ellington? My name is Jenna Carter, your son. He's been living with us for 7 years. We think it's time, you know." Harper froze. Her stomach dropped. Her son alive, and here were the drawings, proof of a life she had been told was gone. "You? My son?" she stammered, words almost failing her. "Yes," the woman continued. "He's Liam. He's 7 now. He draws all the time. We found a folder of his artwork and thought, maybe it's meant for you." Tears blurred Harper's vision as she dropped the envelope onto the coffee table. She sank onto the couch, gripping her head as memories of the hospital flooded back, the rush, the cold faces, the whispered words that her baby had died. And now this? Proof that all those years of grief had been built on lies. Adrian had warned her about the dangerous path she was about to walk. "Harper," he said gently, "if Liam is alive, finding him will require patience and caution. You cannot just show up and disrupt his life. You need a plan." But Harper couldn't wait. Every second felt like a betrayal of the years she had spent imagining him, mourning him, whispering to his ghost in the night. "I need to see him," she said, voice trembling. "I need to hold him." Adrian nodded, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we do this carefully. I'll help. We'll make sure it's safe." The drawings were more than just evidence. They were a bridge, a lifeline thrown across the abyss of 7 lost years. Harper stared at the folds in the paper, seeing not only her child but a connection to the past that Brandon Hale had tried to erase. Every building, every tower, every bicycle spoke to a life that had survived her absence. And then, tucked into the last envelope, Harper found something else. A small voice memo saved on a battered old iPhone. She pressed play. Liam's voice, soft but unmistakable, filled the room. "Mom? I think you're my mother. Why didn't you come for me?" Harper's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, clutching the phone to her chest. 7 years of agony, heartbreak, and disbelief coalesced into one gut-wrenching wave. She had been told she abandoned him, but the truth was more sinister. He had been stolen from her. And now, the child she thought she had lost was reaching back. Harper's hands shook, her heart raced, and for the first time in years, she felt the terrifying, electric surge of hope. This was no longer just a message. It was a summons, a challenge. The past was no longer silent, and it had found a voice. Harper Ellington barely slept that night. Her apartment in Brooklyn felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in like they had been silent witnesses to her grief for 7 years. Every corner seemed to whisper memories of the child she had been told was gone. She held Liam's drawings and the shaky voice memo close to her chest, as if the paper and audio could anchor him to her, bridge the impossible distance of time and circumstance. She called Adrian Cole late. The first time in years she had shared her raw, trembling hope with someone she trusted. His voice was calm, steady, a lighthouse in the storm. "We need a plan," he said. "This isn't just about finding him. It's about protecting him. Brandon Hale or anyone who helped him might still be dangerous. We can't rush." But patience was a luxury Harper felt she didn't have. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every hour that Liam remained out of her arms felt like another year stolen. The tears came unbidden, sliding down her cheeks as she imagined him in another family's home, thinking of her as the woman who abandoned him. The injustice cut deeper than grief. Anger surged through her, tempered only by fear. What if her appearance scared him? What if the world she had been told she was unfit for had, in fact, made her presence terrifying? Adrian arrived at dawn, his car gliding up the wet streets of Brooklyn. Harper flung open the door as if the drive had been the longest year of her life. He held a file, copies of documents, partial medical records, and hospital notes. He spread them across her small kitchen table. "Here," he said. "This is what we have so far. It's incomplete, but it's enough to start connecting dots. You deserve the truth, Harper." She leaned over the table, reading fragments of her past, each piece cutting like glass. Her name, signatures, and dates carefully manipulated, charts missing, and a faint notation that a male infant had been transferred to another facility under false pretenses. Harper's pulse thundered in her ears. The puzzle pieces were slowly falling into place. Liam was alive, and someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make her believe he was gone. The voice memo played again, and Harper pressed her forehead to the kitchen table. "Mom, why did you abandon me?" The words echoed louder now, resonating with the newly uncovered evidence. She could feel the weight of 7 years of lies pressing against her chest, a mixture of horror and relief threatening to crush her. Her hands clenched the papers, knuckles white. "I will find him," she whispered, her voice shaking but determined. "I will bring him home." Adrian placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this," he said. "We'll do it together. Step by step." Harper took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She imagined Liam on his small bicycle, the Manhattan skyline in his drawings, the faint sound of his voice reaching across years. And she realized that the pain, the lies, and the silence had forged something in her. A relentless drive, a mother's instinct stronger than any obstacle. That night, she packed a small bag, her heart hammering in tandem with the rain tapping against her window. Documents, drawings, phone, and a notebook, everything that tied her to the child stolen from her. She was prepared to face anything, anyone, and finally reclaim what had been unjustly taken. For the first time in 7 years, Harper Ellington felt alive, armed with truth and an unbreakable determination. She was ready to confront the past and the people who had stolen her child. Harper Ellington's investigation led her to a thread she hadn't anticipated. The woman who had once seemed untouchable, untangled in the background of Brandon Hale's calculated lies. Cassidy Monroe. At first, Harper thought Cassidy was just another obstacle, a pawn in Brandon's carefully constructed game. But the deeper she dug, the more she realized that Cassidy held the key to the truth and to Brandon's eventual downfall. It began with an unexpected phone call. Harper had obtained Cassidy's work number through Adrian's contacts. When Cassidy answered, her voice was polished, controlled, but beneath it Harper sensed tension. "Hello?" Cassidy said, tone clipped. Harper swallowed, gathering courage. "I know what you did, with Brandon, with my son. I need the truth." End 4-way. There was a pause, long enough for Harper's heart to hammer in her chest. Then Cassidy's voice cracked, just slightly. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't know he was lying about the baby." Harper's eyes narrowed. "You were complicit. You helped him cover it up." "I thought, he told me you didn't want him," Cassidy admitted, voice trembling. "I believed him. I didn't know Liam was alive. I swear. Is a Rebbe Dane." Harper could hear the catch in Cassidy's voice, the internal conflict that had clearly been eating her alive. "If you really know anything, you need to show me," Harper demanded. The meeting was arranged at a quiet cafe in the Upper East Side. Cassidy arrived, dressed impeccably in neutral tones, a Mont Blanc pen peeking from her bag, a subtle symbol of the corporate world she inhabited. Harper noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact. Cassidy pulled out a folder and placed it between them. Inside were emails, scanned documents, and internal memos Brandon had sent over the years, instructions, falsified records, and notes confirming that Harper's consent had never been obtained. Every page was a dagger, exposing Brandon's manipulation and confirming Harper's worst fears. Cassidy's hands shook as she handed over the final piece, a recording. Brandon himself, speaking into his office phone, laying out the scheme to remove Harper's child and erase all records. "She's unstable," he had said. "We'll manage it quietly. Nobody will ever know." Harper's chest tightened. The voice was the one she had heard echoing through 7 years of nightmares, now amplified in sharp, undeniable clarity. She could feel the rage building, but there was something else. A cathartic release, the first real step toward reclaiming her life. Cassidy looked up, eyes pleading. I know I can't undo it. I'm sorry. But this is the truth. It can help you. Harper's mind raced. Brandon had underestimated Cassidy, thinking her ambition and loyalty would blind her. Now, his empire of lies was crumbling, and Harper held the evidence. For the first time, Harper realized the power had shifted. She was no longer the broken woman Brandon had written off. She had the truth, allies, and a path forward. And Cassidy, reluctantly, fearfully, was on her side. Harper's lips curved in a hard, determined line. Justice wasn't far now. Brandon Hale would pay for every year he had stolen from her, and she would reclaim her son, not just in memory, but in life. The cafe windows reflected the first sunlight of dawn, and Harper felt it, the beginning of a reckoning, and the first real taste of hope since that fateful day 7 years ago. The glass doors of Brandon Hale's Park Avenue office reflected the sharp winter sunlight, glinting off the polished marble floors. Harper Ellington stood outside, folder clutched in her hands, heart hammering against her ribcage like it wanted to break free. Adrian Cole had insisted on waiting until everything was in order, documents copied, allies briefed, and the truth undeniable. Now, with Cassidy Monroe by her side, Harper felt the weight of 7 years lift slightly, replaced by the fiery surge of justice. Inside, Brandon was mid-meeting, his tailored suit pristine, Mont Blanc pen dancing across a contract. He looked up, and Harper felt that familiar chill, the one that had haunted her dreams for years. The smile he gave her wasn't warm, it was smug, arrogant, certain she had no power left. "Harper," he said, feigning surprise, "I didn't expect you here." N22. She didn't answer. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Cassidy, who nodded subtly. Harper set the folder down on the sleek glass conference table, flipping it open to reveal the evidence. Falsified hospital records, internal memos, emails, and the voice recording of Brandon detailing the theft of her child. Brandon's jaw tightened. "What is this?" His voice carried the first note of panic Harper had ever heard from him. "Your lies," Harper said, voice steady but filled with years of suppressed grief. "All of them. And the person you underestimated most, your own employee, made sure they couldn't stay hidden." She nodded to Cassidy. Cassidy stepped forward, holding a tablet with the voice recording. Brandon's eyes widened as the unmistakable sound of his own voice filled the room. "She's unstable. We'll handle it quietly. Nobody will know." Time seemed to stop. Brandon's carefully constructed empire of deceit, built over years of manipulation and intimidation, was unraveling in real time. Harper felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power. She had the evidence. She had allies. And most importantly, she was about to reclaim the life stolen from her. "You lied about my son," Harper continued, tears glinting in her eyes but her voice unwavering. "You told the world he was dead. You stole him. And you thought I'd never find out. Dafgon." Brandon's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. Adrian's hand moved subtly, blocking any attempt at escape. Harper's heart raced, but a calm clarity settled over her. This confrontation wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. The city outside bustled, oblivious to the reckoning unfolding inside. The towering glass walls of Park Avenue bore witness to Brandon's fear, the stark contrast to Harper's resolve. Slowly, he sank into his chair, defeated, the mask of control finally cracking. "You have no idea what you've done," Brandon muttered, almost to himself. "I do," Harper said. "And now the world will know too. You'll answer for every single lie, every stolen year, every tear I cried over a child you thought you could erase." A long silence followed, broken only by the hum of the city below. Harper exhaled, a tremor running through her body. It was over. Not fully, there were legal steps still to take, but the first, most important battle had been won. She had confronted the man who had destroyed her life, and she had not faltered. Harper turned to Cassidy and Adrian, a quiet smile breaking through her exhaustion. Outside the windows, the Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly, a symbol not of what had been taken, but of what could be rebuilt. For the first time in 7 years, Harper Ellington felt whole. She had faced the past, and it had finally answered back. The following morning, Harper Ellington walked out of Brandon Hale's Park Avenue office with her head held high. The folder of evidence felt lighter in her hands now, though the weight of 7 years of lost moments still pressed heavily on her chest. Adrian Cole walked beside her, offering quiet support, while Cassidy Monroe trailed behind, carrying the digital files that would ensure Brandon couldn't manipulate the story again. Harper's mind was consumed by one thought: Liam. 7 years of wondering, of endless nights imagining what he looked like, what he sounded like, what he was thinking. The drawings, the shaky voice memo, they were proof, but they were also a reminder of time stolen, a reminder of the pain she'd endured without the chance to be a mother. Adrian led her to a neutral location, a small suburban park where Liam often rode his bicycle after school. The crisp February air was sharp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and winter chill. Harper's heart thumped against her ribs as she approached the playground, scanning the rows of children. And then she saw him, her son, taller than she imagined, with the same curious eyes that must have been hers, carefully studying the world around him, iPad clutched under one arm and a sketchbook tucked under the other. Her chest tightened. She stepped forward slowly, every nerve in her body alert. She didn't want to startle him, didn't want to frighten the life he had built with his adoptive parents. But as Liam looked up, their eyes met, and Harper saw recognition, a spark that she hadn't dared to hope for. "Hi," Harper whispered, voice trembling. I'm Harper. Your mom." Liam's small hand clutched the handlebars of his bike, fingers white with tension. "Mom?" he asked, voice a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. "Really?" "Yes," Harper breathed. "I didn't leave you. I never wanted to leave you. They told me, they lied, but I'm here now." The words seemed to reach him slowly, like sunlight filtering through clouds. His eyes welled with tears, and for a moment, Harper feared he would turn away. Then, tentatively, he stepped toward her, the sketchbook slipping slightly from his grasp. Harper bent down and opened her arms, and he ran into them, the warmth of his small body against hers, igniting a flood of emotion she had carried alone for years. "Mom," he whispered again, burying his face into her shoulder. Harper could feel every heartbeat, every tremor, and she pressed a kiss to his damp hair, tasting tears and hope at once. The world felt like it had stopped spinning. The betrayal, the lies, the stolen years, they all seemed to fade in that single embrace. Adrian stood back, watching quietly, his expression soft but proud. Cassidy, wiping a tear from her cheek, offered Harper a small smile. The web of deception had been shattered, and now the truth was in their hands. Harper knew the road ahead would be challenging, rebuilding trust, repairing the years lost, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. She had her son. She was finally the mother she had always longed to be. For the first time in 7 years, Harper Ellington could breathe fully, knowing she hadn't abandoned him. And Liam, her son, had finally found the mother he had been waiting for. The moment Harper Ellington had dreaded and hoped for all at once arrived quietly, yet with a tension so thick it felt like it could crush the room. She, Adrian Cole, and Cassidy Monroe were seated in a small neutral conference room, papers and tablets strewn across the polished wooden table. Harper's fingers clutched her folder, knuckles white, while Cassidy's hands trembled as she prepared to reveal the evidence that would finally unmask Brandon Hale. Adrian leaned forward, voice low but commanding. "Remember, Harper, this is about the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. You're here to reclaim what's yours." Harper nodded. Her heart pounded in her ears. Every year of pain, every tear, every moment she had been told she was unfit, all led to this. Across the city, Brandon likely believed he was untouchable, his web of lies impenetrable. He didn't know Cassidy had the courage or fear-driven loyalty to turn the tide. Cassidy took a deep breath, holding up her tablet. On the screen were emails, scanned documents, and the voice recording of Brandon himself detailing the plan. The falsified hospital records, the consent forms he forged, the instructions to the staff to remove Harper from the picture. Harper swallowed, every muscle taut. "So, this is it," she whispered. "This is what proves it all." "Yes," Cassidy replied, voice quivering. "He told me everything. I thought I was helping him. I didn't know it was a crime. Until now." Adrian interjected, calm but firm. "We'll make copies of everything. Legal counsel will secure them, and then Brandon has nowhere to hide." Harper's mind raced. For years, she had felt powerless, watching him walk through life unscathed while she suffered silently. Now, the roles had reversed. She had the power, the proof, the leverage. Cassidy continued, explaining how Brandon had manipulated the hospital staff, altered records, and relied on her compliance to maintain the facade. Every revelation added weight to the room, layers of betrayal unfolding like a carefully stacked domino chain, ready to collapse. Harper could almost hear the echo of each lie, each stolen moment, each injustice whispered back at her. Harper looked at Adrian. "We have to confront him. Not just for me, but for Liam. For every single lie he's spun." "If you should," Adrian nodded. "We'll do it. Carefully, publicly if needed, but he will not escape accountability this time." Harper felt a tremor of relief, a strange sense of calm amidst the storm. 7 years of waiting, suffering, and wondering if justice would ever come here, it was. Not in words, not in promises, but in cold, undeniable evidence. Brandon's betrayal, once a perfect wall of impunity, was now exposed for the world to see. A single thought crystallized in Harper's mind. He had stolen time, but he had not stolen truth. The truth was alive, burning in their hands, and it was ready to rewrite history. As the three of them left the conference room, Harper's gaze fixed on the Manhattan skyline through the large glass window. It gleamed with a new kind of promise, a chance to reclaim the years, to reclaim her son, and to finally step out from the shadow of deception into the light of justice. The reckoning had begun. The courthouse loomed like a fortress against the gray February sky, its towering columns casting long shadows over the steps where Harper Ellington paused to steady herself. 7 years of lies, of stolen moments, of grief she had carried alone, had all led to this one day. Adrian Cole walked beside her, calm and collected, carrying the stack of evidence that would finally confront Brandon Hale. Cassidy Monroe trailed a step behind, her nerves taut, a small tablet in her hands containing the recording that could unravel everything. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. The familiar hum of the city outside the taxis, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant wail of a siren felt like another world, removed from the concentrated energy that filled the polished wood and marble of the legal arena. Harper's pulse raced, her hands gripping the folder so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Brandon sat at the defendant's table, his tailored suit impeccable, Montblanc pen poised but trembling slightly in his grip. His lawyers whispered urgently, papers shuffling as though the sound could somehow disguise the fear creeping into the room. Harper felt a chill of vindication. This man, who had orchestrated the most personal betrayal of her life, now sat exposed under the same roof that would render judgment. The judge entered, and a hush fell over the courtroom. Every eye followed, every step resonating with authority. Harper's stomach twisted with anticipation, but she drew a deep breath, grounding herself. The first witness called was Cassidy. She stepped forward, tablet in hand, her voice shaking only slightly. As the recording played the unmistakable words of Brandon plotting, instructing staff, falsifying records, the room seemed to contract with shock. Harper felt the energy of truth vibrate through the air. Brandon's face went pale, the first crack in his facade of control. He tried to interrupt, to protest, but the judge's gaze cut through him like a blade. Every lie he had carefully constructed, every alibi, every attempt to erase Harper's existence from Liam's life, was now a public record. Adrian whispered quietly, "Stay calm. This is what we've been waiting for." Harper nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had rehearsed this confrontation in her mind for years, imagining the moment she would finally face him with truth as her armor. Next, Harper herself was called to the stand. She walked slowly, deliberately, each step echoing in the hushed courtroom. The evidence was laid before the judge, who examined the documents with a measured gaze. Harper's voice, steady but thick with emotion, recounted the hospital visit, the falsified documents, the stolen child. She spoke of the grief, the years of false mourning, and the 7 years of silence that Brandon had imposed upon her life. The courtroom held its collective breath as Harper's testimony wove together the evidence, the recordings, and the narrative of betrayal. She felt the weight of the past lift slightly, the air itself seeming to shift as Brandon's authority unraveled before the undeniable truth. Outside, the Manhattan skyline caught the first rays of sunlight, a silent witness to the reckoning unfolding inside. Harper's heart pounded not with fear, but with the quiet, fierce power of justice finally in motion. The war was no longer impending. It had begun. The courtroom had quieted, but Harper Ellington's mind was still spinning. She had faced Brandon Hale, laid bare the truth, and begun the slow unraveling of his years of lies. Yet the tension in the room hinted that the battle was far from over. Behind every lie, every manipulation, there were layers she hadn't yet imagined. And sometimes, uncovering the past meant confronting unexpected ghosts. Adrian Cole sat beside her, calm yet distant, his fingers tapping lightly against the polished wood of the table. Harper noticed the shadow that had crossed his face during the previous testimony, a hint of something personal he hadn't yet shared. She leaned slightly closer. "Adrian, what is it?" she whispered. He hesitated, swallowing. "There's something you should know. About me, about why I've been so determined to help you." His eyes flicked to the judge, then back to Harper. "Years ago, I lost someone very close to me, a younger sister. Medical negligence, a hospital mistake. I was powerless to stop it. Ever since, I've been obsessed with seeing justice done when someone else is harmed." Harper felt a new wave of gratitude mixed with empathy. "That's why you've been with me all this time," she said softly. "You've carried your own pain into this fight." Adrian nodded. "I couldn't stand the thought of someone else being denied their truth. Your son, your fight, it reminded me of her. I knew I had to be part of this." And just then, the judge called the next witness, a hospital administrator who had handled the records during Liam's removal. The administrator entered nervously, clutching a folder, and took the stand. Harper's pulse quickened. Every document, every notation, every email Adrian and Cassidy had gathered was about to face official scrutiny. As the administrator recounted events, Harper could see cracks forming. Hesitations, vague explanations, contradictory statements. Adrian's calm presence guided the proceedings, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. Each pause, each subtle contradiction, revealed the truth behind Brandon's manipulations. Outside the courtroom, the winter sun reflected off the glass towers of Manhattan, a silent witness to the unraveling of deceit. Harper held her breath as the administrator finally admitted that some records had been intentionally altered, signed by Brandon without her consent. The words reverberated like thunder in her chest. 7 years of lies, of grief, of believing her son was gone, it was all being exposed, layer by painstaking layer. Harper glanced at Adrian. His eyes met hers with quiet determination, a shared understanding passing between them. This wasn't just about the legal battle anymore, it was about reclaiming stolen time, validating years of pain, and protecting the child who had survived the betrayal. As the session adjourned for a brief recess, Harper stepped outside, taking in the crisp Manhattan air. The streets were alive, oblivious to the storm of truth breaking inside the courthouse. For the first time in years, Harper felt hope beyond fragile whispers. The past had emerged, yes, but it also meant the future could be rebuilt. And as she walked back into the courtroom, folder in hand, Harper knew this. Every secret, every betrayal, every hidden truth was now on the table, and there was no turning back. The small conference room was thick with tension, the air almost electric. Harper Ellington sat stiffly, her fingers gripping the edges of the folder containing the evidence they had collected. Across from her, Cassidy Monroe shifted nervously, the glow of her tablet casting soft light across her anxious face. Adrian Cole stood nearby, a quiet pillar of support, watching Cassidy carefully. This is it," Cassidy said finally, her voice shaking but determined. She tapped the screen, bringing up the recording of Brandon Hale speaking to his staff, outlining every step of his deception. I know I was part of it," she admitted. "I helped him cover it up. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time. I didn't know Liam was alive." Harper's chest tightened. She had expected anger, confrontation, perhaps even defensiveness. But Cassidy's confession was different. It was raw, almost painful. "You have to tell the truth," Harper said, voice steady but soft. "If you want him safe, if you want justice, this is the moment." Cassidy nodded, swallowing hard. "There are emails, files, even handwritten notes. He thought I would never go public, but I can prove everything, every lie, every order he gave. It's all here." She opened the folder and passed the tablet to Harper. Every digital document, every scanned memo, Every secret instruction Brandon had written over the years unfolded before Harper's eyes. The weight of years of grief, of false mourning, pressed down on her, but it was mixed now with a fierce sense of justice. This was not just evidence, it was a lifeline. The truth, finally tangible, was in her hands. She could feel the years of manipulation, the stolen moments, and the silent suffering slowly beginning to untangle. Cassidy's hands trembled as she continued, "I didn't know the whole truth, Harper. I thought you had abandoned him. Brandon made sure I believed that. I see now that I was wrong, and I'm so sorry." Harper exhaled slowly, letting a wave of emotion wash over her. The rage she had felt toward Brandon, the years of grief, the isolation, it didn't dissipate entirely, but there was a sense of release. Cassidy's courage to finally step forward, to confess, had created a path forward. A way to confront Brandon fully, legally, publicly. Adrian placed a reassuring hand on Harper's shoulder. "This is the turning point," he said. "With this, we can take everything to the court. There's no escaping accountability now." Was number one. Harper nodded, eyes fixed on the tablet, her gaze unwavering. The pieces of the past that had been hidden, manipulated, and destroyed were finally being restored. She felt a strange, almost electric surge of hope. Brandon's carefully constructed empire of lies was beginning to crumble. For the first time, Harper realized the enormity of what was happening. A betrayal so deep, a child stolen, and yet now the truth could prevail. The road ahead would be hard, but Harper had allies. She had evidence, and she had a chance to reclaim her son, to repair what had been broken for 7 long years. Cassidy leaned back, exhaling, relief mingling with fear. Harper looked at her and nodded, silently acknowledging that bravery had many forms. One truth had shattered the shadow of years, and the fight toward justice was now theirs to claim. Harper Ellington sat in the cramped attorney's office, the peeling paint on the walls a stark contrast to the polished glass towers of Manhattan she had left behind. The folder of evidence lay open on the worn wooden desk, alongside a battered MacBook Air and a cup of lukewarm coffee, symbols of both struggle and determination. Adrian Cole stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, while Cassidy Monroe fidgeted nervously across from them. This was the moment of decision. The fight could go public, but it could also fracture everything Harper held dear. Harper's eyes scanned the documents again, emails, memos, voice recordings, hospital files, all carefully compiled to prove Brandon Hale's deception. Every word, every signature, every falsified record was a dagger piercing through 7 years of lies. And yet, stepping into the legal battle meant exposing Liam to public scrutiny, risking the fragile life he had built with his adoptive parents. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down harder than it ever had before. Adrian leaned closer. "Harper, we need to think carefully. Going after Brandon is the right thing, but we have to protect Liam. We can't let him become a pawn in this fight." Harper closed her eyes, feeling the ache in her chest, the years of grief and longing mixing with fierce maternal instinct. "I can't let him go without knowing the truth. He deserves to know his real mother, but I also don't want to shatter his world," she whispered. Cassidy's voice trembled. "I can testify. I can make sure the evidence holds. Brandon has no defense against this. But he's dangerous. He might try to fight back." End quote. Harper opened her eyes, staring at the skyline outside the office window. The sun reflected off the Manhattan buildings like shards of hope, sharp and brilliant. She knew what she had to do. The hard path was the only path worth taking. She had to reclaim Liam, reveal Brandon's crimes, and face the consequences together, no matter how dangerous or painful. "I'll do it," Harper said, voice firm. "I'll fight. For him, for the years stolen. I'll take every risk, every battle, because hiding anymore isn't an option. I won't let Brandon control the story any longer." Adrian nodded approvingly, pride and relief in his eyes. "Then we proceed carefully. Step by step, legal motions first, witness statements, and full exposure of the documents. We'll ensure the court sees the truth exactly as it happened." Cassidy exhaled, tension easing slightly. It's time Brandon Hale faces what he's done. No more lies, no more manipulation. 11 done. Harper felt the weight in her chest shift. Pain remained, but determination surged. This wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming life and protecting her son. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every tear shed alone had led to this moment. The fight ahead would be grueling, but Harper had allies, truth, and the unwavering resolve of a mother who refused to lose again. As they left the office, Harper held the folder tightly, her heart pounding, eyes sharp with purpose. The path was hard, dangerous, and uncertain, but it was the right one. And for Liam, for herself, she would walk it to the end, no matter what Brandon Hale tried to throw in her way. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with tension, whispers, and the hum of anticipation. Harper Ellington sat at the plaintiff's table, clutching her folder like a shield, Adrian Cole beside her, and Cassidy Monroe poised with her tablet containing the damning recording of Brandon Hale. The city outside seemed unaware that inside, a reckoning years in the making was about to unfold. Brandon entered last, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. He looked composed, but Harper noticed the slight tremor in his jaw, the tension in his hands. His lawyers whispered rapid instructions, eyes darting nervously to the evidence Harper and her allies had laid out. Brandon had underestimated Harper for 7 years. Today, he would learn that underestimating a mother's love was fatal. The judge called the courtroom to order. Harper took a deep breath as Cassidy played the voice recording of Brandon's detailed plan, the falsification of hospital records, the illegal adoption maneuver, and the systematic erasure of Harper's parental rights. The room went silent. Every juror, every onlooker, even the court clerk seemed to lean in, the weight of Brandon's actions settling like a physical presence. Brandon's confident facade began to crack, his lips pressed into a thin line as each piece of evidence was unveiled. Emails, memos, and even witness testimony from hospital staff who had been coerced into silence, layered together to construct an airtight narrative of his deceit. Harper felt her pulse quicken. This was the culmination of years of fear, grief, and careful planning. Adrian took the stand next, recounting the inconsistencies in the hospital's documentation and highlighting the timeline Brandon had manipulated. His testimony was precise, calm, and impossible to refute. Harper watched Brandon flinch as details emerged, the falsified dates, the forged signatures, and the concealed communication with the adoptive family. Every lie he had constructed began to collapse in real time. Harper herself was called to testify. Her voice, steady yet charged with emotion, narrated the night of the supposed loss, the hospital's manipulation, and the years of silent suffering. Tears welled in her eyes, but she pressed on, channeling every year of anguish into words that left no room for doubt. She described Liam's drawings, the voice memo, and the hope that had sustained her through every lonely night. The courtroom absorbed every word. Brandon's lawyers attempted to object, to discredit witnesses, but the judge's gavel silenced every protest. Cassidy's testimony followed, detailing the internal memos and confirming Brandon's direct involvement. The pieces fit together like a mosaic, each fragment revealing the enormity of the deception. By the time the jury began deliberations, Brandon sat slumped, his carefully curated image of control shattered. Harper felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion, knowing the truth had been revealed. The fight had been long and brutal, but justice was finally within reach. As she left the stand, Harper glanced at Adrian. He offered a small, reassuring nod, and she realized that the journey was far from over, but the first decisive victory had been achieved. The trial of the century had begun, and Brandon Hale was on the defensive for the first time in his life. The sun had barely begun to rise over Manhattan, casting a pale gold light across the glass towers, when Brandon Hale sat alone in his Park Avenue office. The silence around him was oppressive, a stark contrast to the confident hum that had defined this space for years. His carefully constructed empire, the reputation, the wealth, the meticulous control, was unraveling faster than he could process. The courtroom evidence, Cassidy's recordings, Adrian's meticulous testimony, and Harper's unwavering presence had pierced the illusion of invincibility he had spent 7 years crafting. He stared at the Mont Blanc pen on his desk, once a symbol of power, now a reminder of every lie he had told. His lawyers had gone from whispering reassurances to pacing nervously, their words meaningless against the tide of undeniable proof. Emails, memos, voice recordings, all meticulously documented, all pointing directly to him, were now in the hands of the court and the media. Every attempt to manipulate, conceal, or intimidate had failed. Brandon's phone vibrated. Messages from senior partners, colleagues, and even his family flashed across the screen. Each text carried the same weight: legal threats, distancing statements, and subtle but unmistakable indications that his alliances were crumbling. The network of protection he had relied on was evaporating. He realized, with a pit forming in his stomach, that he was utterly exposed. He sank into the chair, pressing his forehead into his palms. The voice memo from Liam, the one Harper had discovered, echoed in his memory. "Mom, why did you abandon me?" The question, once buried and silenced, had returned to haunt him, a relentless reminder of the human cost of his ambition. Every day of deception, every calculated move to erase Harper and manipulate the adoption, now stood naked before the world. Outside the office, the city thrummed with life, oblivious to the collapse happening in the room above. The sleek, polished corridors and the reflective glass windows had once symbolized Brandon's control, his mastery over his environment. Now they felt like a cage, the sunlight casting shadows that seemed to mock him, highlighting the isolation he had created. Brandon's colleagues no longer offered solace. The partners who once deferred to his judgment avoided eye contact, aware that association with him could tarnish their own reputations. Even Vanessa, once complicit in his schemes, had quietly severed ties, leaving him to face the consequences alone. The first legal notices arrived, summoning him to hearings, depositions, and investigations. For the first time, Brandon realized that power could not shield him from accountability. The media had picked up whispers of the case, and his name, once synonymous with success and control, would soon be linked publicly with deceit, manipulation, and the stolen years of a child's life. Brandon sat back, chest tight, the weight of 7 years crashing down. The golden boy of Manhattan, untouchable in his mind, was falling. And the reckoning, inevitable, inescapable, and well-deserved, was only beginning. Harper's voice, Liam's drawings, Cassidy's courage, and Adrian's precision had combined into a force he could not fight. He had lost control, and for the first time, he understood what it meant to face the consequences of every lie he had ever told. The sun spilled over the New Jersey suburb like a warm promise, illuminating the quiet streets where Liam Wilder had spent the past 7 years. Harper Ellington stood at the edge of the driveway, her hands gripping the small bag containing his drawings, a few toys, and a notebook where she had started writing letters to him for years she thought she would never see. Her heart pounded as she watched him ride his bicycle up the cul-de-sac, his small frame surprisingly tall, his movements confident and carefree. For a moment, Harper simply breathed, taking in the sight. This was the child she had been told was gone, the boy whose life Brandon Hale had tried to erase. And yet here he was, alive and vibrant, carrying the same spark she had imagined every night when she whispered stories into the dark. Liam's bicycle came to a slow stop as he saw her. His eyes widened, uncertain, scanning her face as if trying to reconcile this new presence with the life he had always known. Harper knelt, lowering herself to his level, her eyes locking with his. "Hi, Liam," she said softly, her voice trembling despite the steadiness she had cultivated. I'm your mom, Harper." The words hung in the crisp morning air. He blinked, the hesitation visible on his face, and then, slowly, his small hand reached out. Harper's chest tightened as he stepped toward her, placing his hands in hers. For the first time in 7 years, she felt the weight of her absence dissolve, replaced by the electric warmth of reunion. Behind Liam, Mark and Jenna Carter stood silently, watching the reunion with cautious relief. They had loved him as their own, had nurtured him with all the care a child could hope for, but they had also always sensed that a part of him was missing. And now, Harper's presence completed the picture, filling a void that had existed quietly in the background of their lives. Adrian Cole stood a few steps away, his hands in his pockets, watching Harper and Liam. He had guided Harper through the storm, helped her navigate the treacherous waters of deceit, and now he allowed himself a small smile. This wasn't just Harper's victory, it was theirs too, a testament to persistence, courage, and truth. Harper bent down, producing a small sketchbook and pencils from her bag. "I thought you might like to draw with me," she said. Liam's eyes lit up, recognition and curiosity mingling in his gaze. Together, they began to sketch the Manhattan skyline, each line connecting past and present, imagination and reality. For the first time, Harper realized that the life Brandon Hale had tried to steal could not be destroyed. Liam was alive, thriving, and safe. This new chapter wasn't about revenge or anger anymore. It was about love, rebuilding, and the possibility of a family formed not just by circumstance, but by choice. As the sun rose higher, Harper felt a quiet resolution settle in her chest. She had her son, she had allies who had fought with her, and she had the strength to finally embrace the life that had been waiting for her. The past had returned with a voice, but now it had been answered, and the future stretched wide open, full of promise, love, and belonging. The winter sun dipped low over the Brooklyn skyline, casting a golden glow across Harper Ellington's small apartment. The room, once quiet and suffocating with years of grief, now felt alive, vibrant with possibility. Liam sat on the couch, sketchbook open, coloring pencils scattered across the coffee table, his laughter filling the space Harper had imagined for so long. She watched him, heart swelling, knowing that 7 years of stolen moments had led to this fragile, perfect reunion. Adrian Cole stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. His gaze fell on Harper, steady and warm, a mixture of admiration and quiet longing in his eyes. He had been with her through the storm, guiding her, protecting her, helping her reclaim not only her son, but also her own strength. For the first time, Harper felt safe enough to acknowledge the unspoken bond that had grown between them over months of shared struggle and triumph. "Harper," Adrian began, voice gentle yet deliberate, "I know you've spent years fighting to reclaim what's yours. And you've done it. Your courage has brought Liam back to you, whole and thriving. But there's something I need to ask." Harper turned toward him, feeling the pulse of her heart in her ears. She had expected this moment in her dreams, but reality held a weight all its own. "What is it?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. He knelt before her, hands clasped, eyes never leaving hers. "I know you've been through hell, and you've earned every moment of happiness you have now. And I want to share it with you, if you'll let me. Harper, will you let me stay? Not just in the fight for justice, not just in this chapter of your life, but in the life we could build together? For you, for Liam, for us?" Time seemed to pause. Harper's eyes welled with tears, a mixture of relief, hope, and love. She thought of the years of solitude, the pain of believing she had lost everything, the small victories and devastating losses. She thought of Liam's small voice, the sketches of the Manhattan skyline, and the bond that had been rekindled between mother and son. And now, here was Adrian, offering her not just companionship but a chance at a life she had once believed was impossible. Harper felt a smile spread across her face, tears sliding freely down her cheeks. She reached out, taking Adrian's hands in hers. "Yes," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Yes, you can stay. You've been my anchor through the storm. And now, we can build something new, together." Adrian's lips curved into a soft, relieved smile. He leaned down, brushing a gentle kiss across her forehead, a promise of love, protection, and partnership. Liam watched, eyes wide, then ran to hug Harper, enveloping her in a warmth that no years of grief could have stolen. In that small Brooklyn apartment, the past and its pain finally met justice, and the future stretched out like the sun over the city skyline, bright, promising, and full of possibility. Harper Ellington had reclaimed her son, found the truth, and discovered love anew. The stolen years could never be returned, but the years ahead belonged wholly to them. And as Harper tucked Liam into bed that night, with Adrian quietly watching over them, she whispered softly to herself, "We're home. Finally, we're home." So, the story has finally come to an end. And here we are, my wonderful friends. If you're still with me right now, there's something in this tale that's touched your heart, right? What Harper went through reminds us that life can be unfair, full of lies and betrayals, but the truth, persistence, and courage will always find a way. It's like Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Harper couldn't change the past. She couldn't erase the pain, but she chose to face it, reclaim her son, and rebuild her life. That's a lesson for all of us. Life will throw storms our way, but how we respond defines our strength. Sometimes healing isn't about forgetting the hurt, but about moving forward with clarity, patience, and love. And if you're sitting here, thinking about your own struggles, remember, the path may be hard, but the truth and your courage will guide you. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because together we can explore more stories that inspire us, remind us of our inner power, and teach us how to keep moving forward. no matter the storm.